Hello and welcome to Mysteries of Science. My name's Dan and I'm the editor of Science and Nature, the monthly magazine from the team behind The Week Junior.
And I'm Michael, the features editor. This is the podcast where we explore the strange phenomena and bizarre events that have left scientists scratching their heads and, despite their best efforts, remain well and truly unsolved.
Well, Michael, we've reached the end of season 5 and what a season this has been. Blimey.
Yes, we started off by exploring the origins of humanity itself with Yuval Noah Harari before going high up into the Himalayan mountains on the hunt for the abominable snowman.
And then we plunged to the very depths of the ocean and we discovered the incredible story of Mary Tharp before shrinking down to the subatomic level to wrap our hands and our heads around some quantum weirdness.
You know, I think that episode may have been my favourite, Dan, especially as I got to speak to the science consultant behind the Ant-Man films to find out just how scientifically accurate they are.
Yeah, I remember that one. Big fanboy episode for you. Do you remember how scientifically accurate were the Ant-Man films again?
Not very. Turns out not very.
Yeah, but what was my favourite episode? Let me think. I loved the one on King Arthur, where I showed that I was actually a massive King Arthur fan as well, and we tried to find out whether or not that legendary swashbuckling hero existed.
Yes, I loved in particular listening to Win Scutt on that episode telling us all about Tintagel Castle, the birthplace of King Arthur. And someone else I enjoyed listening to is Francois Brunel, the photographer, in our episode on doppelgangers, people who look exactly alike despite sharing no family relation.
Yes, I'm still on the hunt for my double. I know your double is walking around out there. I'm also on the lookout for UFO clouds and ball lightning, those mysterious weather phenomenon after our investigation into weird weather, which featured Kirsty McCabe.
Yes, and now we've reached the last episode of season 5, but the fun isn't over yet, because today, listeners, we're going to be answering your mysteries.
Oh yes, this is one of my favourite episodes. This is where you get the chance to ask experts questions, your burning, mind-boggling questions that you want the answers to.
Yes, we've assembled a top team of experts to help us out here, so let's get started. This is Mysteries of Science.
Okay, Michael. So, where do we begin? First question.
Well, Dan, for our first question, it's over to Samuel.
Hi, I really hope you can answer this. Is it possible for animals to talk to humans? Bye!
Ooh, Samuel, that's a very big one. We definitely need to find our very own Dr. Dolittle to help us answer this one, I think.
Hi everyone, my name is Adriano Lameira and I'm an associate professor in psychology at the University of Warwick.
Welcome to the show, Adriano. Now, for those who don't know, Adriano was involved in a study back in 2016 where they were able to get an orangutan called Rocky to mimic human speech.
I love it. That's. I apologise for calling him our very own Dr. Dolittle before. Tell us, Adriana, is it possible for animals to talk to humans at all?
I would say, posed as it is, the answer is probably no. So the verb there is talk, which implies a lot of things, implies that a lot of traits and capacities are in place, right? So when we say that someone talks, we are assuming that the person can express its inner thoughts and emotions and experience in a very specific way, particularly spoken language. And if we look at the world's languages, we know that all languages are, for example, composed by consonants and vowels. There's a huge cultural diversity and richness across all the world's languages, but this is like an undisputable universal trait or feature of the world's languages. They are composed by mixing up consonants and vowels into combinations that then start composing syllables and words and phrases and sentences. And so when we ask, can an animal talk to us? In that sense, the answer is no, because it's very unlikely that that animal has consonants and vowels in their call repertoire as we do.
Okay, so if we're thinking about talking in the way that you or I might talk to each other, Dan, then it's unlikely an animal will be able to talk to us like that. However,
I wouldn't be too sure.
However, as Adriana's study showed, there are animals closely related to us which can copy the sounds we make.
There are animals in the animal kingdom that are very closely related to us in behavior and biology, particularly great apes, which among non-human primates are our closest living relatives today. Part of our research kind of has unveiled that all great apes also have consonant-like and vowel-like calls in their repertoires. And they also can mix these in combinations that are very similar to syllables in the way that they are articulated. Right? So this is very exciting because now we can start looking at great apes and the way they communicate with each other vocally to start to piece together the puzzle of language evolution. Of course, now there's also a almost like a hidden facet to this, which is what are the messages that great apes are expressing, right? So we know they are using the consonant and vowel-like calls as a canvas to express their inner experience. But what is their inner experience? What is the meaning that they are putting and assigning to these syllable-like combinations? And this is slightly a little bit more difficult. So it's still possible to investigate this. It's much more challenging for us because, of course, exactly because animals cannot talk to us and express and directly explain what they are experiencing, researchers have to find out smart little ways of trying to open the hatch and peek into their minds.
Oh, I'd like to open the hatch and peek into the mind of my cat. So I think what Adriana is saying is that when my little cat says, meow, I want to cuddle, it might actually not be saying that at all. And if they were able to talk like humans, the sound that they make wouldn't necessarily mean the same things to them as they do to us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I wonder whether one day we might be able to invent some sort of animal-human translating device so that we could have a conversation with an animal the same way we are now. I mean, what do you think, Adriano? Is that possible?
Well, there are certainly people thinking in those terms, although I do think that it still belongs that possibility of direct human-animal communication in through language. I think it still belongs a little bit to the realm of science fiction, and this is because we don't even know how they perceive the world. Our own experience of the world is tied to our bodies in our senses, and so if we look at an animal with a complete distinct set of senses and perception over the world, actually if they had the capacity to talk to us, we don't even know whether we would be able to conceive what they were trying to communicate to us. So for example, imagine a bat that perceives the world through echolocation. If the bat actually had the capacity of language and speaking to us, could we actually even fathom what the bat would be trying to explain to us? Because echolocation is completely an alien way of perceiving the world to us. Probably the same applies with whales. Whales live hundreds of years. They have these. They are huge. They dive the depth of the ocean. They have these slow moving, almost like wise type of movements, and so even their perception of time is completely distinct from us. And so again, if a whale could speak back to us, could we actually understand what that whale would be trying to convey to us?
Oh dear, I'm imagining this fictional conversation with my cat. If Fluffykins is trying to talk to us, and I don't think I'd be able to understand anything it was saying because its perception of the world would be totally different to mine.
Yeah, I mean, I find it hard enough to speak to you, Dan, let alone trying to speak to an animal like a whale.
Well, it's funny how what seemed to be such a simple question to ask, and isn't this always the way? Like with these mysteries, it sounds like a pretty straightforward question, and then it's led us to consider the very nature of language and the way how we communicate is shaped by our perception of the world. Wow.
Yes, it actually reminds me of a question we did in the last Your Mysteries, which seems simple, but opened up a whole can of worms, or should that be a can of chickens?
Oh no, I think I know where you're going with this.
Yes, in the last episode of Season 4 of Mysteries of Science, we had this question from Sandy.
What came first, the chicken or the egg?
So we had both sides of the argument on the show. One, that the egg came first from our old friend Peter Gallivan from the Royal Institution, and the other that the chicken came first, which was said by David Papineau, Professor of Philosophy of Science at King's College London.
Flashback!
Hi everybody, it's Peter here from the Royal Institution. You might recognise me from my Head Scratchers column in the Week Junior Science and Nature. The chicken ancestor slowly accumulated changes, and at one point in time it would have all of the characteristics that we would say, okay, yep, that's what we call a chicken. And so in this case, that first chicken grew out of an egg.
I'm David Papineau. I'm Professor of Philosophy of Science at King's College London. I realise that my foolish former view about eggs coming first has now been entirely discredited, and I am happy to recant.
Yeah, this question was, it was an absolute mind bender, wasn't it? And I didn't know what to think at the end, and it turned out that you, our listeners, were also completely split down the middle. We got so many comments about this particular question on Apple Podcasts, and I think it's probably a good idea. Let's share some of them with you.
Yes, so Poddy398 wrote, the egg obviously came first because before there were chickens, there were dinosaur eggs, weren't there? I think Poddy398 raises a very good point.
Yes, but how about this from Ramsay Meisner? The chicken would have come first, as the first chicken egg would have had to have come out of a chicken. So the chicken clearly came first.
That's a good point, but perhaps this is the solution from Zavi99. The chicken and the egg came at the same time. There was obviously a chicken in the first ever chicken egg.
Oh, maybe that's cracked it. Cracked it. Although I suspect that the debate will still rage on long after this.
Yes, if you want to give us your thoughts on this or anything else that we've discussed, then you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, or even better, send us a voice message by heading to funkidslive.com/mysteries and hitting the big red button.
Smashing. Yes, I think it's time for our next question, please.
So this next question is a bit more of a serious one, and it was sent to us by Mariana.
Hello, my name is Marianne, and I just wanted to know why some people are born with certain disabilities and why others aren't.
A really interesting question, and we wanted to be really sure that we answered this properly, so we turned to Alice Smith to help us out.
Hi, I'm Alice Smith. I am a Year 13 student, so by the time you are probably listening to this, I will be doing my big A-level exams. In my spare time, I sit as an accessibility advisor on the SMET Futures Youth Board. So SMET is a social enterprise that tries to get more women and non-binary people from age 5 to 25 into STEM. I also am a wheelchair basketball player, so I really love my sport. That's a little bit about me.
Oh, thanks for joining us, Alice. So what would you say in response to Mariana's question?
So I think it's hard to give one specific answer because everyone is born with different things and experiences their own disability differently. So I think probably the best way to look at it is from 3 different perspectives. So probably from the genetic side. So you have your DNA from your parents, and sometimes there's bits of that aren't quite right and has mutated to give you different characteristics. So one example of a mutation is having blue eyes, but it also can be different things. So for example, my disability is genetic, so I have got various different bits from my parents, which means my legs aren't the best in the world. Probably the next one to look at is when the baby's developing. So when they're in their mum's tummy, or I think the medical name is the womb, then sometimes things can go wrong. So sometimes they might not get the nutrients they need, or might be born really, really early, so haven't got all the development yet kind of done when you are inside the womb. And then probably the third one for why people are born with disabilities is that if something's gone wrong during the birth. So sometimes babies are born not being able to breathe or not being able to have any oxygen, amongst other things. It is pretty rare, however it can happen, and that can leave people with disabilities such as cerebral palsy.
And would you mind telling us a little bit more about your disability, Alice, and your experiences?
So as I said, I've got a genetic disability, so my connective tissue doesn't work properly, as well as my autonomic nervous system. So your autonomic nervous system controls your stuff like your heart rate, and all the things you can't consciously control. So things like your blood pressure and like your liver function and stuff like that. And also the nerves don't work quite properly in my legs, which means I can't feel them or experience huge amounts of pain. So I've got a variety of symptoms, and some of it's genetic, some of it I've developed over time for whatever reason.
Thanks for sharing that with us. And you were telling us that you don't think disability has to be thought of as a bad thing?
I don't think it is. It's not a good thing at times. There are days where I'm missing school or missing seeing my friends. It isn't good. However, my disability isn't inherently bad. Yes, I use a wheelchair and sometimes, or I use a crutch or things like that. However, I've got to do some really cool things from it. So I've got to meet politicians and to talk about what disabled young people need from the government. I've got to go to concerts and festivals and a lot of football games. And actually, without my mobility aid, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So whilst disability can be difficult at times, and I can't speak on behalf of everyone, I don't think it needs to be a bad thing. So I think my experience with disability has definitely been complex, and it's a huge part of me. I will never be able to get rid of it. But overall, it has brought some positives.
And what advice would you give to any of our listeners who have a disability?
I think, first of all, I understand how isolating it can be. I think I spent a lot of my time when I was in primary school at Great Ormond Street, and then my care moved to various different hospitals around the UK, and it can be not very good at times, but there will be people there to support you. Your friends might not necessarily understand what's going on or why you have to miss school so much, or why. I think I remember coming back from when I had an operation with huge bruises where I'd have to have blood tests and things like cannulas where they can put things straight into your bloodstream, so if you need extra fluids or if you need medication, and them looking really weird. And there are people who will support you, and there are maybe organisations, depending on what exactly your disability is, or you might be able to access support through your hospital if you're at the likes of Great Ormond Street or Alderhay. But it might be tricky, but there will always be people who will fight your corner. They might just not be your friends, but my support network's been a huge deal to me, and it wasn't from school, or my teachers have been a huge help, but it wasn't from my friends at school. It was from maybe adults in my life, but also people through my wheelchair basketball community and things like that. So I think my main message is there will always be people who are there to help. It might just not be where you think it is.
And what can our listeners do if they'd like to help?
You as listeners have got huge power to help change stuff. So whether that's joining a youth board like what I did, or even talking to members of staff at school, I think the big thing, what I've said throughout this podcast, is that disability is not a bad thing, but there's always things we could do to make life easier for disabled people. And I think as listeners you've got huge power. So maybe you've listened to this and you've got more questions. Maybe it is doing some research, so you can help integrate disabled people better into the stuff you do. So whether that's doing team stuff at school, or maybe doing something at Scouts or Guardians. But I think as listeners you've got huge power, and I hope you can use that. And this podcast has been informative, and this might have answered Mariana's question. As listeners, you might have more questions, but there's lots of things that you can research and find out, and I hope this has been helpful.
Thank you so much, Alice. That was That was fantastic, and yeah, loads of great ideas there of things and positive things that we can all do, and just keeping informed, keeping asking questions, and finding out about this amazing and mysterious world. Now, one mystery that I actually would love to mention here is one that we haven't actually done yet on the podcast, but it also shows that that these mysteries that we look at are changing and people are coming up with new answers all the time. This is a mystery that we covered in Science and Nature magazine about something called the Tully monster.
Ooh, what's the Tully monster, Dan?
It sounds good, doesn't it? It sounds intriguing. So the Tully monster is like a 300 million year old sea creature which is found as a fossil, and scientists have found it nearly impossible to classify what kind of animal it was, just basically because of how weird it looked.
So what did it look like?
Yeah. Well, I've seen reconstructions of what scientists think it looked like, and the first thing, I guess it looks a little bit like a mashup of the Loch Ness Monster and a squid. It's kind of got a long squiddy body and then this long snout, a bit like a trunk with teeth at the end, so like a long neck with teeth at the end, and these eyes jutting out from either side of its head, which kind of look like a pair of handlebars, really. Definitely really weird. Definitely worth looking up a picture online if you haven't seen a drawing of one before. But even though it's called a monster, it is it's not really, and it looks like a big Loch Ness monster kind of thing. It actually would probably fit in the palm of your hand. It's a small fossil.
Okay, that does sound very weird. I'm definitely going to need to look up a picture of that. And I know how scientists like to talk about animals, Dan. I know one big question they always ask is whether it's a vertebrate, so an animal with a spine, or an invertebrate, an animal without a spine. So which one is the Tully?
Well, this is the new research that has been done, and this is the confusion. Scientists weren't sure, and this new discovery turns the old ideas on its head, and now they think the Tully monster wasn't in fact an animal with a spine at all, that they think it might have been an invertebrate. So, yeah. Like I say, these mysteries are constantly being mysterious and surprising and coming up with brilliant answers, I think. Brilliant answers? I'm not sure. Or possibly just more mysteries.
More questions.
More questions, yeah. Not brilliant answers, more questions.
Okay, interesting. So you mentioned that was covered in the magazine. How can our listeners maybe read more about this and perhaps some other mysteries that we've written about in the past?
Yeah, good plug, Michael. There is a brand new bookazine, which is a sort of book-length magazine, which has just come out. It's called, can you guess what it's called?
What's it called?
It's called Mysteries of Science,
and
it's all of the mysteries that appear in Science and Nature magazine, all collated together, put together in a massive, wonderful, beautifully illustrated and fun package. And it's available. It's on sale now.
Now, speaking of prehistoric animals, here's an interesting question.
What if the dinosaurs came back?
Great question, and to help answer it, we've turned to two of the filmmakers behind the hit Apple TV Plus dinosaur documentary series, Prehistoric Planet.
I'm Matt Gunton. I'm one of the executive producers with Jon Favreau of Prehistoric Planet.
Hi, I'm Tim Walker. I'm the series producer of Prehistoric Planet, which means I help take Mike vision and marry it with John's vision and then turn it into a daily machine that produces dinosaurs at the end of it.
Welcome to the show, Mike and Tim. So tell us, what would happen if the dinosaurs came back?
I think if the dinosaurs came back, it would be ace. Absolutely ace. What an amazing time to witness the resurgence of, the most majestic animals we've ever known. I'd be packing my bag and going off to find them and taking a camera to make the next series. I don't know about you, Mike.
Well, one thing, we wouldn't have to get in the time machine, that's for sure. We could just, as you say, pack our bags. But of course, Darren, Dr. Darren Nation, our scientific advisor, would say they're still here. Dinosaurs are with us today because birds are dinosaurs. And it's something that it's a constant refrain from him. And it does make you look at birds in a different way. And actually, indeed, it makes us look at the dinosaurs that we've brought back to life in a slightly different way. So, yeah, I mean, would there be? How would we get on? I suspect human evolution probably would have taken a rather different turn if the dinosaurs hadn't gone extinct. What that would be? Now, there's an interesting idea. That's maybe.
Ooh, a very interesting idea indeed, and maybe one we should explore in a future episode. And speaking of things we might explore in a future episode, here's a question from Ruben.
Hello, I'd like to know if the Exmoor beast actually exists. We live near it. We live near Exmoor, and we've always wanted to know if it was true.
Great question, Ruben, but I'm afraid we're not going to be answering it today. But that's because we're going to do an entire episode about the Beast of Exmoor in Season 6 of Mysteries of Science.
Yes, Mysteries of Science, your favourite podcast, is returning on the 16th of June for, can you believe it, Season 6, and we've got plenty of new surprises in store, from sharks to UFOs, the Beast of Exmoor, and even, maybe, a little bit of magic. Until then, stay curious.